This is the Ad Non-Tech Podcast, conversations about education, technology, and culture, with Dr. Doug Reed and Dr. Matt Stranek. Thank you for joining us.
My name is Dr. Doug Reed, and I am located on Abagway, the traditional and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people.
My name is Dr. Matthew Stranek, and I am on Treaty Number 8 territory, the traditional meeting grounds and gathering places of our First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples.
Folks, welcome one and all in one, to the second episode of season 4 of the Ad Non-Tech Podcast. Really glad you're here. Really glad you joined us. And I'm Dr. Matt Stranek. Joined with me as ever is the inestimable Dr. Doug Reed. And Doug, I know it's been fewer than 2 hours since the last time we talked, but perhaps for the benefit of the folks who somehow didn't see the previous episode, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing really well. I'm at my standing desk now. I'm giving that a go because after I got rear-ended in a car accident, sitting for long periods of time hurts. So if you see me bobbing around, if you're watching a YouTube video, it's just because I'm standing and trying to stretch things out a little. But otherwise, great.
Every time we record, and I do mean every time we record, I learn some new pertinent information about Doug and his experience or his situation. I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole, the significant rabbit hole, as a matter of fact, related to my own use of standing desks. I like them. I'm in favor of them. And even absent car accidents, sorry to hear that, my friend.
Yeah.
I am fan of the standing while you work approach, actually, for a variety of reasons. I remember hearing at one point that sitting is the new smoking. I don't know if that can really truthfully be said, how much of an exaggeration that is, but it certainly can feel that way. And in as much as we are talking about feelings, we are talking about morale, we are talking about the affective domain as it pertains to educators, and particularly teachers in this case, whereas in our previous episode, recorded fewer than 2 hours ago, folks, if you can believe it, that's exactly how productive we are today, on a Sunday even, my goodness, where we were dealing with morale vis-a-vis the administrator element in various educational settings. So again, Doug, thanks a lot for such a compelling, interesting sort of two-parter on this one. If we could, perhaps just to set it up, why 2 entire episodes about morale, and why differentiating teacher morale from our previous discussion, where we definitely talked about this, but perhaps not as directly.
Sure. Because we were in September and in Canada, that's when the school year starts. I worked all summer, but all my colleagues came back after their summer off. And you could see the morale difference from how things were last winter to how they are now. But a huge component of it is the outpouring of concern of what's happening in Alberta, Canada. That's where I was an educator for more than 20 years. And there's huge issues that have suddenly exploded when it comes to the teaching environment there. And the morale is just not good. So I thought, let's talk about morale. Let's see what we can do to shed some light on this in the Ad Non-Tech Podcast.
Well, that is dope. I appreciate that. To use a term, possibly outside the academic jargon, but for those who may be checking out this show sporadically or for the first time, just to put a bit more context on it, at the present moment, you might not be able to tell based on the cast of characters and the setting behind me, I'm presently located myself in Alberta. I came here for work. It was a 2-year contract that very, very abruptly, I mean, the day after I submitted my winter semester, got truncated into submitted my marks for the end of the winter semester. It got truncated into a 1-year contract, which meant that I was effectively without a job, without an institution, and with all the, I guess, associated destabilizing relative to my personal financial situation and in various other ways. I get into it a bit in the notes, the WordPress notes, that is, for the show. I'm not going to spend a disproportionate amount of time on it here, but I am curious, Doug, a bit. You've spent significant time in Alberta, way more than me. I am certainly on my way to a different educational setting, jurisdiction, geography, as the case may be. I'm going to BC, folks, and it's going to be soon, to see my kids primarily, but not exclusively. I do wonder a bit, Doug, apart from just whatever you're aware of about my situation, directly or implicitly, if you could maybe just speak a bit more to perhaps the salient issues which are informing your concern, such that you wanted to speak to this.
Sure. A big reason is when I dug into, I've had a number of people that I used to work with that have gone to social media to say, you can't believe how bad it is now. And these are people that the only thing you ever see is pictures of them having coffee with their friends or them going for nature walks. That's all that their social media feed is. And then out of the blue, bang, here we go. It's so bad, you can't believe it. To push these people that are career educators, they've been in a caring profession their whole lives, to say, you can't believe how bad it is. And it's like, okay, we have to address that. We just do, because I feel for them. I feel for them so much. And I've been in that spot. I've been in the spot where it's like, oh my God, I can't believe how bad it is. And people didn't believe me till after the fact. Right? Because I've worked in situations and I've been parts of layoffs, and it sucks, but it's also, okay, maybe that was for the best. Right? Like, as an employee, I couldn't change the culture, and I couldn't change the environment. So I needed to get out. So somebody else made the decision. It wasn't my choice, but because I am always looking for the security.
And as always, Doug, I appreciate your very generous and sympathetic spin on contemporary issues. Again, speaking from just my own standpoint, I can safely say that the province of Alberta has some absolutely unique cultural and economic factors. I'd say more cultural than economic, which have placed it in a unique situation relative to any other jurisdiction I've worked in myself over the years. And again, I'm just reaching the point where after 13 months living in this area, with 10 months, 9 months, as a matter of fact, of active employment in the area, I've seen it from the perspective of being gainfully employed and optimistic and forward looking, and having that just utterly pulled out from under me and having to kind of scramble to regroup personally, emotionally, financially, and in all these other ways. So if you can kind of take my own situation, which I promise not to belabor in the next hour or so, but to speak to how these people that you may see typically posting very benign, very low-key kind of social media, to have them actively expressing their dissatisfaction or their dismay at their circumstances, it's sort of, I can understand perhaps why and how, even though not having direct knowledge of these individuals or their particular circumstances within the wider culture, educational culture in particular, of this Alberta place. I can understand why a bit myself, a bit. And
Oh,
so we defer to the
yeah.
literature so we don't veer entirely into the world of personalities and anecdote. I am super impressed on the face of it by this 25 item list, which you have found here, Doug, vis-a-vis Morrison, 1949, going back in the Wayback Machine, because that is how we roll, particularly Dr. Doug.
Yeah, I'm a sucker for that. And thank you for humoring me every time I do it. So Morrison in 1949 published an article called An Evaluation of Means for Promoting Teacher Growth and Morale. So these are ways to do it. It's when I was a classroom teacher, one of the things I was taught in my BED was help people see where they want to go. Help. So what I used to do at the first couple of days of every year is like, we want to find success as a class. What are things that will help us find success? And then we'd make the big list. And then we'd have a list of things that won't help us find success or whatever the goal was. And I'd put the two up, and then I would write them. You know, those big sheets of paper, those big flip charty kind of sheets?
You betcha.
I would write those down. Right? I'd leave it on the board and I'd write them down, and then they went on the wall for the year. And then when students were doing something that I wasn't a big fan of, I would walk over and point to the thing on the wall and say, this is what you're doing. Right? You are not headed towards the success that we talked about. And so the kids got tired of me walking over there, and it worked, right? It helped build rapport, and they would understand, like, yeah, Mr. Reed, we know. So it was good, right? It was like that gentle reminder. So when I found this Morrison article with the list of 25 things, it's how many of those are happening? We know those are the success points. Those were the success points from like 75 years ago. We know that. Or 76 years ago now. These are the things that they identified way back when. Are all of these happening? Especially in Alberta right now, honestly, quite honestly, because that's just my context for what's been going on there.
Well, and you've spent a significant amount of time in this province yourself, as we've talked about, significant amount of time, right? So you're speaking from the standpoint of being informed of the area.
Yeah.
But really, Doug, before I let it go, I want to perhaps flash back just a bit to our previous episode, recorded a scant 120 minutes ago or fewer, wherein we did have a few minutes of discussion about Doug's very, I think, enlightened practice towards creating classroom rules with the students in your room as a teacher,
Yeah.
and how these collaborative rule-based schemes tend to be more effective because they promote ownership over work processes and social processes for students, and they sort of set up appropriate levels of accountability. So I just wonder, just in your descriptor here, about your process for what's going to be help you be successful, what will be detrimental to that, if in fact you're referring to that same sort of class charter collaboration, or if you're talking about something here a bit different.
I used to do this on 2 different days. Like the first day of school was the first day of school. Like, holy smokes. Yep. you come home exhausted because it's exhausting. And then day 2, it was, okay, we've been through the basics. I want to help you find success. What does success look like? What's our goal? And I would do all that because it was, how do I pull the students in and get them to know me a little bit? And then by day 3, day 4, that's when we set up the classroom rules.
Okay.
Because then I knew for me, the worst thing was knowing a kid's name by lunch on the first day. Because it's like, oh, that's going to be painful. This kid is going to be a nightmare all year. And I was never wrong. By day 3, day 4, I had a feel for them. And that's when we could set the rules up. And I would guide it. Of course, I'm not letting people just willy-nilly do that because I'm
if I may, and again, I think you've spent more time practicing within K-12. In fact, I can guarantee that you have. But that speaks to me a bit to some kind of notion, almost a differentiated instruction, wherein you are playing to the strengths and perhaps challenges of the specific individuals within your room, as opposed to a generic prescription for behavior, generic policies, or curricular interventions, but actually making them suited to the specific individuals based on your knowledge of them, whether informal and implicit, as you're kind of describing, or perhaps more formally through an IEP or the like, which I can sort of refer to vis-a-vis a friend and colleague's practice who I'm in pretty close contact with. So that to me is a pretty enlightened viewpoint, as always, Doug, and I wouldn't expect otherwise. So out of this
But
very
people
impressive
thought I
list,
was nuts. Like I had other teachers, I would explain this, and they'd walk by in the hallway, and they're like, "You're crazy, man. What are you doing?" And it's like, "Nope, this is what I'm doing. This is who I
you're
am."
letting the inmates run the asylum. How could you? You're letting the
Yeah.
monkeys loose. How could you? Yeah,
The
I
literature caught up with me, so that's good. I'm on the right side of history with that, so I enjoy that.
as well as being morally correct in the moment and being able to be sanctimonious about it, because that's your prerogative.
Yep,
You may as well
absolutely.
just go with it. Just wear that hat. Just own it. But out of these 26 items, Doug, I do wonder which of them may resonate the most for you, just kind of on a personal level.
So what
25 items,
Morrison
sorry,
did
not
back
26.
in 76 years ago is made this list of here's what helps teachers. This is what helps teachers grow. This is how it helps their morale. This is what we can do to support teachers, because we know if we support teachers, student outcomes are better, right? The students
Right.
learn more and things are better and there's less discipline problems and they go on to
By
become good
any
citizens.
metric whatsoever. Right.
Yeah, like all of these things are wonderful. And what I found interesting was number 11 was travel. Right? When was, as a K to 12 teacher, I think I had one chance a year maybe to travel someplace that wasn't to a staff meeting in another school, other than going to whatever the 2 or 3 days of teacher PD that the whole province shut down for and stuff. Like, does that happen? And that's when I got to choose my own PD. That was the freedom to say, oh, I want to go there to learn that thing. And it was that, write your lesson plans up for the substitute teacher and go do it. Or actually meeting with other teachers, the opportunity to visit other teachers with their, I love that. I did that twice.
Absolutely.
And that was by far the best. How often is that an opportunity now? I know they try to. I know I'm old enough that I was a lone wolf. A colleague of mine came and did a guest lecture at a university class I was teaching one time. And he's like, oh yeah, Doug and I, we're lone wolves. We went in and we did it all. Now everything's collaborative. They're trying to get everybody to do whatever. And it's like, I went back and I was a K to 12 teacher because I needed to move my pension out of Alberta. That's why I was a teacher in BC, just to get my pension out. But what happened was they put 6 of us in a room, but how collaborative were we? Right? We were all teaching our own students and doing our own things. It was nice to have somebody to chat to, but it wasn't really different than the staff room. But that was also during COVID, so I don't know if that was just panic.
I think to speak to your point just a bit, that meeting other teachers, if I look on my experience where for about 3 years, I was basically the primary instructor of this one online class for University of New Brunswick, where I completed my MEd, and then a few years later, I got to teach for a while as what they call stipend instructor, which is a term I don't like at all, but that's what my title was, teaching an instructional design course online for Master's of Ed students. And one of the aspects of it, I was still early in my career, and I don't pretend to have done even a particularly awesome job with those classes, because I was still very much at the stage of learning my practice, particularly teaching online, which at that point was quite nascent. But one aspect of what I really appreciated and enjoyed about being in that role for the 3+ years that I got to do it, pretty much every semester, sometimes multiple sections, was in fact that these MEd programs, particularly offered entirely or somewhat online, bringing in educators from all over Canada and in some cases internationally from just a whole wide range of contexts, from K to
Yes.
12 committed people who had been there for years and wanted to get the salary bump or what have you, their own personal reasons, sometimes not specifically tied to that. But sometimes it also would include military commanders who wanted to move up in their profile with the government, with the Department of Defense, or again, people from private industry, people from the public sector in various ways. And that was, to me, a significant benefit, just because my assignments were designed by nature to have them reflect and develop materials for use in their own settings. I just got so much out of just learning about their context from
Yes.
those products, from those assignments, and from the discussion forums and the like. So that was just an invaluable part of that experience for me. And I'm glad to see you kind of speak into that a bit through your selection within that list.
And other things in this list are pretty typical for people that aren't going to go to the webpage, right? It's things like salary, things like tenure, things like actual supervision, constructive criticism, participation in administration and planning policies, right? It's actually departmentalization. Like, let's put all the science teachers together. Let's put all the arts teachers together, whatever the departments happen to be. Let's put all the K to 3 teachers together and put all the grade 4 to grade 6 teachers together. And adequate supplies and equipment. Like, can you imagine doing that to forest or firefighters? It's like, oh, no, you guys have to fundraise for hoses. It's like, no, it's crazy. And having demonstration classes, right? Being allowed to watch how other people are teaching a topic.
That is so significant. And in resource scarce environments where teaching hours are not always aligned with what you call enlightened professional development practices due to scarcity or micromanaging of fiscal budgets and the like. Fiscal budgets, I don't know if that's an oxymoron, but it might be, but where administrative necessity trumps, I use the word, pedagogical value, right? Yeah. This is something which we've been fairly critical of as a set of approaches and practices throughout the life of the show. And again, I think that's a pretty good way of kind of dovetailing what we talked about in the previous episode with where we're currently going, specifically on the teacher impacts. So again, Val, I think you've really raised some good points there.
Of this list, the one that has disappeared that I would love to have come back is number 19, occasional leaves of absence.
Oh boy.
They do it in post-secondary, right? Yeah, people get sabbaticals where they take a year and they go do their research or they go do whatever. But occasional leaves of absence, I don't think that exists anymore. Unless people get a note from their doctor to say you're on a medical leave, that's not proactive. That's somebody's burnt to a crisp.
Or they're manipulating the system because they can, but mostly because they're burned out. I agree. It's almost though if you don't have these policies in place that support some of these items, the teachers will improvise. Teachers will figure out their own efficiencies. Teachers will go ad hoc without appropriate levels of administrative or other kinds of support. Not to beat on administrators like they're a pinata or whatnot, but again, without appropriate supports, education fails due, I think, in a large case to, as you say, burnout, attrition, just the onslaught of demand without any reasonable reward associated with it.
Yes. And that guides us to the Parks 1983 article. So that's a perfect segue. And it's leadership in times of austerity. And Parks says, how does one compensate professionals for inadequate books and supplies, large classes, disruptive students, public criticism, limited assistance, increased duties, and the lowest salaries paid by the highly educated personnel. And it's like, whoa, that was written over 40 years ago, but I have seen every one of those things when it comes to people posting about what's going on with the Alberta teachers right now. It's like, okay, so what have we learned in the last 40 years? Not much. Honestly.
Well, if I may,
Yeah.
I'm going to assume that this journal is American. If that, I'm just making an assumption because America's way bigger, and as such,
Yeah.
they are disproportionately probably represented in the literature in English generally. I have to say, I feel for our American brethren, speaking as a Canadian.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I mean, I also feel very sorry for myself as an educator in Alberta. Don't get me wrong. I can and have and yet shall go into that particular motivator significantly. But as my first glimpse of this quote, thinking on it now and based on what you've just described, I did at one point early in my career, just I guess for my own interest, read a book about why teaching is such a hard slog in the US, particularly. And from what I can tell, it's really a strong, it's you have to be somebody who's motivated sufficiently to do that job because you care about it and love it, because the monetary rewards are simply not there. It's disproportionate to any kind of other profession that requires similar levels of training or experience or skill. And the compensation for it, to say nothing of the social status, is just so abjectly low, particularly in the US, and perhaps, if I may, in certain Canadian provinces, which would tend to emulate US approaches. Make of that what you will, just speculating, not naming names, just putting it out there.
Yeah, I dug into that about 20, 22 years ago. And all the American stuff that I read, it was always, oh, it's about the money. It's about salaries. It's about funding.
Okay.
But the attrition rates
Yeah.
across a bunch of different countries, across Australia, New Zealand, UK, Canada, right? Across those countries, they get paid a lot better, but the attrition rates were almost identical in the research I could find.
Okay.
So it
that is an
wasn't
interesting insight, pal.
Yeah. So the insight was, for the Americans, it's about money, but all
Right.
these other countries get paid a lot more respectably, and
But they
still
still
the
have
same
the
attrition rates.
similar levels of attrition.
Yeah, they still had the very similar attrition rates. So definitely, because for the Americans, they get paid so pathetically in so
Right.
many cases that
Yeah.
that's the situation. And so, yeah, I just wanted to touch on that. I don't have any of that literature here now. Like, I read that
Yeah. No,
a couple of decades
absolutely.
ago.
And
But
what I like about this quote is the fact that it's made up of questions, right? It sort of takes an activist proposition wherein those questions are informed by a critical viewpoint, which I think is something we're trying for on this show whenever we can, to interrogate certain kinds of practices, interrogate certain lines of thinking as much as we can in our own limited but awesome way through this podcast.
And the second part of the quote from Parks here is talking about how does one lead in a group where morale is so low, 40% of surveyed respondents would not select teaching again if they could go back in time, and 57% are planning to leave. Right, like those numbers are gross, right? Like, it's just, whoa, okay, there's a systemic issue here. And this summer, I met with some good friends whose daughter is in an education program in Alberta, about to graduate, all excited to be a teacher. And the first thought in my head was, get the heck out of Alberta, right? It's like, oh, where's your daughter moving to, right? She's not staying in Alberta. She'd be crazy to, right? It is go to BC or go to Ontario or go overseas, but you can't stay there. Please tell me she's not trying to stay here. I didn't say that out loud because they're lovely and they were so happy and this she's not a kid anymore. She's whatever, 21, but she's still a kid to me because I knew her when she was so
Well,
little.
one of the greatest favors I think that I can lay at the hand of my late stepfather, who's departed, but he was RCMP. He spent a full career with the RCMP. And when I came out of the BEd program, I had a contract in hand to go to a fly-in community. It wasn't in Alberta; it was in northern Manitoba. And
Ooh, yep.
my RCMP stepfather, former RCMP at that point, he just told me, Matthew, you got to just return the contract. You just got to say you're not going there because these fly-in communities, if you go in there, you're going to be completely isolated and you will be tested, and the residents of that area will see your presence as a challenge or a threat, and you will have to really, really stretch yourself to be successful. For somebody just coming out of your program, he said, just take my advice. I was the RCMP officer who would get on a plane, come in, settle disputes, make an arrest, whatever you had to do in that environment. But so I considered that a bullet missed, not to use too much of a term. But when somebody early on in my career that I deemed very credible gave me that suggestion, you bet your bottom dollar I appreciated it.
Yeah, teaching in the classroom is hard enough. You need to pick your community as well if you can. You can't
just sort of go, okay, well, by default, it'll be this one, or these people are the first who are going to say yes, or whatever. You really have to be strategic. Not that I'm anybody to suggest what constitutes navigating your career effectively, because boy, oh boy, am I dealing with the topsy-turviness of my own decisions somewhat, apart from whatever the local circumstances have had involved in that. So again, I think your guidance to a young educator is well placed. And as much as this podcast can be a vehicle for practice, advice, suggestions, theory, even if we want to go there, I think that absolutely is on point with what we would be talking about here. So thank you for that, Doug.
Oh, you're welcome. I want to jump to 1998, the Lumsden article about teacher morale. And awesome. Lumsden presents a quote about teachers are being stretched to the limit. Expectations are expanding exponentially. The problem with the teaching profession is we don't say no. We say yes. What can we do to help? Because we're part of the caring profession, right? So not only are they teachers now, but this is 27 years ago. But now we're frontline social workers because that was the shift that happened in society at the time. And teachers aren't trained to be social workers. That wasn't part of it. But of course, we said, yes, of course, we're going to try. And when you throw technology in over the last 27 years, right, they also have to be technology experts now. So they have to deal with all the ed tech that's been added. They have to deal with, put your grades online. Oh, here's where the virtual classroom is. Oh, what do you mean you work in a school that was built like a bunker? So Wi-Fi doesn't work. How can I get, what do you mean it's bring your own device?
And particularly, folks, if we may, in a post-pandemic context where, again, for those who can recall back those many, many years ago, 5 years ago, whatever it's been, where there was the so-called pivot towards fully online instruction, which, apart from my own very whatever experience as part of that and higher ed, I definitely witnessed the limitations and challenges and some awesome inspirational successes with my own kids, where they had to finish their year fully online, and if memory serves, they had to do at least part of the following year online as well. And so technical expert among the various and sundry hats which an educator is supposed to wear, you're taking advantage of people who don't know how to say no a bit, a bit, I think, is kind of the gist of this here.
Yeah. And with you want to talk about the social work aspects that get added. I look at what happened with COVID as the triple P's: panicked, pandemic, pivot. Right? That's what I'm seeing. So the triple P's happen on top of everything else. These poor teachers, where it was like, yeah, we don't know what we're doing, but all of a sudden tomorrow you got to be fully online to get all your material there, and it's like, we don't teach that way. That's not what we do. This isn't a movie where the lead character jumps into some spaceship and suddenly knows how to fly it. That's not what we're doing. But we figured it out, and there was a huge cost that what I believe has been underreported, but that's my opinion on that.
I really think that stretching to the limit, again, right? Teachers improvise, teacher build things in the moment to suit the immediate needs of the folks, the students who they're involved with, their particular needs. And to use metaphors, constructionist metaphors, you take what's around you and you craft your practice out of what is immediately at hand. So the instinct here for educators to improvise, the skill set, the soft skills of flexible thinking, being present in the moment, being able to simultaneously manage class and deliver curriculum, all of these things are vitally important, but don't always get the appropriate professional development for these things that may get taught in BEd programs or potentially might not even, in as much as they're getting trained to be a specific kind of teacher and a specific kind of disciplinary orientation with a subject matter expertise, perhaps at the expense a bit of some of these habits of mind, habits of practice, which could be perhaps better augmented with appropriate resources.
Yes, and part of that is the tail of support afterwards.
Right.
Which just doesn't happen. It's like in instructional design where people talk about the ADDIE model of instructional design. The last E in ADDIE is evaluation. I've been doing this for more than 25 years, and I've seen one project, one thing actually evaluate after the fact. So it just doesn't happen. Can you imagine teaching somebody how to swim? Saying, oh, here are the strokes. Here's what you got to do. And you explain all the stuff to them because you know how to swim. You do all that. And then you watch them. And then it's like, okay, now it's your turn. And then you leave. You can't leave them. They'll drown, which is what's happening, right? They need that tail of support. Say, no, lift your arm more, or tip your head this way, or kick your legs that way, or whatever the follow-up support needs to be. We know, we're educators. We know how to teach people how to do stuff. How come it's not being done for us? Which is...
You got to support the people who support. And that may a bit dovetail with our previous discussion on administrator impacts, in as much as I would like to think that leaders, true leaders, as opposed to bosses, which again, we got into in the previous episode a bit, see their role as supporting those who support, helping those who help, rather than some sort of top-down hierarchical reinforcement of certain cultural and social constructs. And I think potentially here, Doug, if I may, that may bring us somewhat into Mackenzie 2007, where you are going back. Shouldn't say back. It seems like the Australian literature is significant for you due to the fact that A, it's awesome, and B, due to your own pretty significant time there, including your doctoral qualifications. Am I right, my friend?
Yes. I definitely have a bias for the Australian context. I really like it because I see it as such a time of growth for me. That's where I got confidence. Honestly,
it's where you got swagger.
Yeah, I don't know if I have swagger, but I definitely have confidence. And I've had people say, "Oh, you're arrogant." It's like, no, that's what confidence looks like. right? I know what I'm doing now. I've had world experts reach out to me because of my expertise. So yeah, I'm on the right path now. And that was an epiphany for me. It was like, whoa, these people want to know what I think? It was like the first time the Sydney Morning Herald, the big newspaper, contacted me and said, hey, we want to do something with you on the big Saturday edition on whatever. And I was like, oh, okay.
that is a legit feather in your cap, my friend.
Yeah. Yeah. And they didn't like what I had to say, so they didn't include any of it, but whatever.
It's the thought that counts, said nobody ever, but still.
Yeah, it was, here's what my expertise says. Oh, that doesn't fit with the tone of the article. It's like, okay.
Doesn't align with the editorial vision. You can't always choose what the people are going to say when you ask the question, if you can imagine.
Yeah, exactly. They were still really nice and polite about it and stuff, but one of those things.
So this article in 2007, you've got it here, a decline over the past 30 years, currently 48 years. Again, wouldn't expect otherwise. A pretty significant historical perspective in this one. Doug, did you want to speak maybe apart from the Australian factor, which is significant and awesome, what about this particular quote tends to resonate for you?
When they're talking about teacher morale being low, and they're using words like undervalued, frustrated, unappreciated, demoralized, it's like, yeah, I've felt all those things. I've felt those things when I've just gone to a house party in the town I was teaching in, and everybody has been in school, so everybody has the crappy teacher story from when that teacher how many years ago did that thing. And it's like, well, what about the other 200 days that year plus the other 12 years? Right? How come you never given us the good story?
Why do you always gravitate towards the negative? It's true. For some reason, villains are always more interesting in a superhero movie. You can't have a good superhero movie without a good villain. And one of the reasons, and I'm just completely making this up in the moment, so bear with me, it might be a strenuous metaphor, but a hero is only as interesting as the villain that they have to overcome. And sometimes one of the reasons that the Batman story is so compelling is that very often the hero will be seen by the wider social milieu within the narrative as it's ambiguous, right? As an audience, it's clear to us who we should be cheering for, but within the embedded context of the fictional narrative universe, you can't always distinguish as readily. And that is a relatable aspect of our contemporary interactions. It's much easier to sort of preemptively call things into question rather than sort of highlighting the positive and differentiating that and elevating that because it's deemed as less interesting somehow, less prescient. Just again, to go to a writing metaphor, I always try and frame what I have to say in writing in positive statements rather than saying it's on this or it's D that, or, I try and have positive jargon to frame something rather than simply enumerating how something is deficient or what it isn't. So that's a bit where your very prescient anecdote here takes me, my friend.
And I could go down the superhero rabbit hole with you with the 1980s Chris Claremont X-Men and stuff, but I might hold off on that.
Okay.
But yeah, I don't want to get too far away from this, even though I would love to have that conversation with you because that really interests me. Part of what Mackenzie's talking about with teacher morale is teachers are well aware that it is a more demanding profession than it was. And I know ed tech has a lot to do with that. I know the cultural impacts and how society has moved have had a lot to do that. And from the previous list that we talked about, like from Morrison,
yep,
none of the positives have changed, right? Like salaries haven't got better, right? It's the supervision better, right? Like all of those things, like they don't have Is the printed material better? No, we don't have enough of it, right? The leaves of absence aren't happening, right? Teachers aren't getting a chance to. So all of these positives that we know will make things better, we are not doing, or the
They're
majority.
sitting
I'm
there in
not saying
plain
all.
sight.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's plain sight. We know what we have to do. It's no different than what just happened to me. I had to put on dress pants that I haven't worn in 8 months, and that was
Say it
humbling.
ain't so.
It was humbling. It was like, oh, okay, this is what's happened. I know how I spent my summer, so now I have to. I know what I have to do, right? I know I have to brush my teeth every day. I know flossing is good for me. I like all of those things that I know. I'm just not flossing as much as I should. I know I'm not moving my body as much as I should. That's why my pants were tighter than I was hoping. So we know these things. We know what to do to help the teachers with teacher morale, which absolutely helps students. All the research clear follows along with that. We're just not doing it. So,
And that lost potential is, again, if you're in a system, if you're an actor in a system in the role of a teacher, and you're looking around and under perhaps measures of efficiency, which are supposed to promote, it's even worse when things are being put to you as we're doing it for this purpose of efficiency, but only in certain areas of the endeavor. And when you're being told one sort of set of messaging, but then evidence with your own eyes and your own lived experience tells you that there's some cognitive dissonance there, at minimum, if not outward disalignment, then you're going to feel perhaps that you are not being properly valued, and that more importantly, again, in a real educator, that your students are not being properly supported through some of
yes.
these wider processes and structures. And so, to speak to a point that we came to last episode, you really kind of mentioned strongly about the value of trust. And we made sort of a tie there to accountability in education and all of these sort of external factors sitting in plain sight that are being unrealized and unacted on do have a detrimental effect due to their absence.
Yes. And we're the Ed Non Tech podcast. And the way Ed Tech is being implemented is absolutely part of the issue. It absolutely is. It's when I have to go home and I'm spending 2 hours answering email, it's like, no. What do you mean I have to do the attendance online? It's like, so I have to go to my computer and do that online instead of just looking and say, yeah, so-and-so is not here. It's no, I got to go plug that in because otherwise the secretary is going to come to my office and say, how come you haven't done your attendance yet? It's not online. It's like, no, just no. But
it's a non-starter.
Yeah, it should be a non-starter, but it isn't. The way the technology is being used is having a detrimental impact.
And if I may, again, flashback just a bit to sort of the pandemic era, I, for one, and I can't speak for anybody else, but I have to assume that others felt that way. Part of the reason that I experienced what I would consider pretty significant burnout during that initial period was that in shifting all the work to one's home, I mean, I never stopped working. And in fact, because I spent so much time just chipping away at a project or trying to sort of keep things going, absent, I have to say, significant leadership or strong leadership, in my case, that would be suggesting otherwise, I really put way more hours into the thing than I was being paid for sure. And further to that, the quality of work I was turning in was not as good as it should have been. And it had a cyclical effect where my sense of self efficacy by the end of that was pretty shot. And I have to say, again, without naming names or even the institution, But due to a leadership vacuum under those circumstances, I just completely had a collapse of morale, and it had pretty deleterious effects for my wider career at the place in question. And so,
Yeah.
again, that's only my interpretation of it. I suppose others who may have been around at the time would probably frame it otherwise. I'm a no good Nick. I know. Please forgive me, but at the same time, I think the truth has to be, of the two, has to be sort of in between those sets of narratives. We're both a bit problematic, Doug. We both have been known to be a bit problematic. So I don't think I'm speaking out of school with any of this.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't figure out how to be less problematic. I'm trying.
I wish I sincerely, to any potential employer who's looking at this, I'm a reasonable guy. Doug's a reasonable guy. We're both reasonable people. And we do, I think, provide pretty valuable perspective for those who are willing to partake, because I think at the end of the day, we're both willing to entertain notions outside of our a priori assumptions, which again is a function of training and experience of educators of some decades, as we tend to be. So, does that put us into this very, very wild and woolly AI document part here that you've included, Doug?
Okay. This is what I've done. Because I'm a lifelong learner, I got to try stuff. I have to experiment, try to be creative.
It's awesome.
So there's a Willis and Werner article from 2010 called Factors That Affect Teacher Morale in Academic Leadership, the journal.
Yep.
And it was lengthy. So there is a quote there that I really like, and it was, historically, the research on teacher morale and its effect on student achievement has been positively correlated. And it's like, yeah, no shit, Sherlock. Right? It's that's part of it. It's like, yes, if the teachers are down, the students don't do as well. If the teachers got strong morale, the students do better. It just is. We know that. But what I then tried to do, because I had to experiment, and thankfully listeners don't have to see my notes. They did.
You could if you wanted to.
This article was then written without all those headings that I love and without the lists that I love. And it was just big, long paragraphs all over the place. So what I did is I grabbed chunks of it and I threw it into a generative AI and said, hey, can you summarize this for me? Because
which application in particular? Sorry.
Oh, this was ChatGPT. It was just the one that happened to be open on my desk.
Gotcha.
But what I want, because so much of what I'm doing now is I'm trying to help educators with dealing with ChatGPT. So I said, hey, what are the factors? Find me the factors and give me the dot points and all that sort of stuff.
Oh, that's actually kind of cool that you got to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I took it onto myself to say, let's make this an authentic learning opportunity. Let's see what we've got. And it was like, ugh.
It's a slog, was it?
So it popped out something in seconds. All right. Like, here you go. Here's your list. And then I read through the whole article and the number of mistakes that were in there and the number of things that were presented incorrectly. It was like, whoa, if I was a student and I had done this, I wouldn't know enough. But I've got the trained gaze of years of experience and training to say, oh, that was wrong. Nope, that's wrong. That doesn't go here. But where did they get this? And so,
well, it almost sounds like
it was painful. But no, it was just painful. It was like, this was supposed to save me time. I didn't want to read all that stuff in this depth, but I had to.
As a literacy and literature guy for pretty good amount of my career, almost half of it, thereabouts, what you described to me from the sort of treatment of the original source, the set of practices, which I would argue technological literacy being very paramount here, you're almost sort of mapping the processes which a reasonable student might endeavor themselves to carry forward. So in terms of an academic support element, I have to commend you on your endeavor in putting yourself out of your own comfort zone to the benefit of learning more on a practical, hands-on kind of level, and thus being able to speak to these individuals, right, who you are supporting from a standpoint of firsthand knowledge and credibility. That was certainly when I was involved as a faculty development officer back in Ontario. That was a huge part of how I was able to make inroads with the faculty because I was a practicing educator or had recent significant teaching experience, and therefore I could offer some insights from that personal standpoint as opposed to strictly from training or an administrative appointment or what have you. So again, Doug, I have to say that I appreciate what you've shared through these notes. And this is a case, folks, where you are going to want to check out the WordPress. I guess, again, just so that I can justify its inclusion in the notes, it does put me in the mind somewhat of what I've experienced in my reading of Technology, Critical History of a Concept by Eric Schatzberg. I'm getting better at saying that. In as much as you really want to have good alignment between the intended meaning, what you are trying to carry out, and the actual meaning, right? You actually want to be able to speak from experience to your practices rather than simply looking up how to use Chat GPT effectively or ineffectively and just kind of pushing it out from that standpoint. You chose to take a deep dive and report the results from experience, which I think is commendable.
Yeah, I was the Harrington and Harrington book from 2006 about authentic education was in my head. It's like, well, this is authentic. This is absolutely using this tool to learn
authentic.
It is inescapably authentic, and I did not enjoy it. I ended up doing so much more work. It did not save me time. But anyway, so that was there.
And so you can say with good confidence, folks, this thing that is supposed to be a shortcut, that is supposed to make your life easier, trust me, it won't. You can say that. The technology is not at the level yet that it can handle such higher order tasks as the purveyors of the technology would want you to possibly believe.
Yes. Yeah, I believe that's all marketing. I don't believe the reason for it is to make our lives easier. I believe it's to devalue knowledge and expertise for people that don't want to be bothered to go get it. But
and to distribute education among non-educators, among more of an instrumentalist or technician class, again, to justify inclusion of my Schatzberg text, but I think actually it is somewhat of a relevant point too. So, Doug, was there anything else we wanted to speak of while we're on the AI tip or anything like this before we proceed?
With Willis and Varner, I do want to talk about the 4 things they presented. They presented a bunch of intrinsic factors, some extrinsic factors, leadership and admin practices, which was a previous podcast, and school culture. So they did cover big chunks of stuff. And one thing they brought up in school culture is teacher workload and prep time, or a positive work culture with decision-making, communication, admin support, and inequities and power distributions, like who has the power. So they presented a lot of those things that affect teacher morale. So the article came up with a lot of great stuff. I just didn't like how they presented it because I'm a sucker for diagrams and dot points. If you can write a sentence and make your point in 5 words, why use 87 words to do it? But that's more of my bias with how I prefer to bring information in.
Absolutely. And again, just speaking to literacy, language, effectiveness of communication, economy of language. I had the opportunity to teach technical writing kind of at the beginning of my career for the first 6.5 years. And now this past year, It was supposed to be 2 years, but thank you, Alberta. It's 1 year, and here I sit. But I was teaching literature, and I really spent a lot of time circling back, I suppose, out of default and habit, where in teaching literature, both in the presentation of my slides and in what I expected of students, I really tended to value brevity, clarity, the most concise expression of a thought as possible, because clarity of expression tends to equal clarity of thought, which tends to align with conceptual clarity. And again, to obfuscate, to use 50-cent words, to use $50 words, and multi clause sentences and the like, it isn't, I don't think, the mark of an educated mind so much as it is somebody who is aware of how to manipulate certain elements of material culture within the educational context, such as the thing ends up in peer review.
Yes. Yep.
And you've got your headphones on. Did you take those off of your headphone rack, which you crafted by hand?
Yes, I did, as a matter of fact, because I got the little beepy beepy noise in my earbuds that says you have no power left. So it was the frantic switch.
Well, that may be an indication here, since we are now in excess of an hour, apart from, oh, look at that. Look at that lovely handcrafted object, which looks a bit like an infinity sign almost in its shaping. Or pi, the mathematical symbol. Pi, there we go. I associate pi with the infinite, and it's not just because of my lack of knowledge of mathematics.
Yeah, I understand.
So,
and this was all reclaimed
visuals. Speaking of visuals, speaking of things that are crafted, thinking of things that have a significance above and beyond their utility of the visuals, and you have to know Dr. Doug is a huge proponent of visuals, and I wholeheartedly and full-throatedly support such endeavor. Are there any of these particular images that you really would like to speak to in advance of somebody hopefully looking them up on the WordPress?
Yeah, there's a Dilbert cartoon from 2013 from my digital clutter that I really appreciate.
We got a lot of Dilbert on here, folks. You got to check the notes.
I so enjoy it. And it's a cartoon about how can we improve the culture. And then one of this says, you could start by being less of a micromanaging D-bag who hides like a big hose on whenever we need a decision. And the boss says, that doesn't help. It's like, oh, is honesty going to be taboo in the new culture? It's like, if you get to the point where your staff is saying that, it's gut check time. It's look in the mirror and say, okay, what do we got to do here?
I think all of us at one point or another, as educators, I should say, possibly non-educators, have experienced those meetings where nobody is satisfied with the reason for being there, and that dissatisfaction is manifest in body language, presence, what somebody's doing in terms of whether they're fidgeting, looking at their watch, playing with their phone, whatever, and as opposed to really high value, motivational kind of meetings where everybody's on the same track. Doesn't seem to happen all that often. But I think, again, Dilbert and relatability for the win, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say there, Doug.
The best advice I have about meetings and education, I got when I was really young from I think I was my third year teaching. And a colleague said, this is what you do. If you just had a meeting and it's at the end of the day, because school K-12 meetings are always at the end of the day, look in the parking lot. If there's a whole bunch of staff people sitting and talking in small groups at their cars, you did not have a good meeting. And I found that in post-secondary, it's the hallway.
There you go.
If you finish a meeting and then there's little groups of people standing at doorways, that was not a good meeting.
It's not just about avoiding returning to their office to move to more tangible work. It's
Yeah.
in fact the after meeting where the fate of the previous meeting is actually being decided in an improvised and informal, I want to say almost community of practice kind of setting, except it maybe has a negative undertone to it. So perhaps an anti-community of practice, an uncommunity of practice. We're the Ed Non-Tech podcast. I'm
Yeah.
putting it out facetiously, but maybe there's some legs to that concept.
Yes. And
So
I
does
have
this
three
bring us
things
to the?
left.
Please do, please do.
The word of the podcast is morale, because we mentioned it again. That's kind of our theme for the day. The
Absolutely.
question. Oh, I screwed up my question of the podcast because this is the same one on both maps. It's how does the teaching profession continue without reaching a breaking point? For people that have listened to the previous episode, it'll be the same one. So I screwed that up in my notes. So I
I don't
apologize.
know if
for
it's
that.
so much of a screw up, so much as it is repeating a salient point, which has been common, I think, to both of our discussions thus far.
I feel like I'm cheating. But that's me. That's on me.
I would say the difference between art and theft is in the eye of the beholder. So
Fair
there
enough.
we go.
Fair enough. And the phrase of the podcast is the triple P's: panicked, pandemic, pivot.
Oh,
That wasn't education, and that wasn't planned. That was panicked is the most important part of that. But that's all I've got.
And the fight or flight response that it can conclude such times under distress.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like we've covered a lot, and I'm prepared to say adios, amigos, until next time. Anything else you wanted to add here, Doug?
Just I'm wishing all educators well, no matter what they're doing, and hoping that we can get through everything that life is throwing at us right now.
We appreciate all of you in all your ways, no matter what, and especially if you're checking out this show. Take care, everybody. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.